This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Garfield Bowen.
Welcome to the Good Neighbor Podcast. Are you looking to search for some of the resources that's available at the Port St. Lucie History Museum? Well, we have a treat for you. Okay, Donnita.
Yes.
Okay, we're audience is looking for you. You just disappeared on us. Listen, we have a treat for you. We have Donnita Graben with the Port St. Lucie History Museum and Education Center. Donnita, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. And thank you so much, Mr. Garfield, for giving me this opportunity to be on your podcast and talk about the museum.
Listen, we're excited to learn all about the museum. Tell us about it.
Well, the Port St. Lucie History Museum and Education Center has only been open about a year and a couple of months. It's located inside of the Peacock Lodge. That is one of our founding ranchers here in Port St. Lucie, and it's a historical building, and it's now located in the port, which is off of Westmoreland, right next to the Port St. Lucie Botanical Gardens.
Okay, so how did you get into the museum as a curator? What brought you into this field?
Well, I'm a retired media specialist and a longtime resident of St. Lucie County, and preserving our history is deeply important to me. Ours is a relatively young city, which gives us a rare opportunity to capture firsthand stories from the residents who were here at the very beginning. And by collecting and sharing those stories now, we ensure that they aren't lost and we can pass them on to future generations. But the roots of the Port St. Lucie History Museum go back to 1996, when the Port St. Lucie Historical Society was first founded. And there was a goal, and the goal was to create a place to preserve and share our local history. And in 2018 is when they took these two historical buildings from the Peacock Ranch. They moved them temporarily to the McCarty Ranch, which is another of our founding fathers or ranchers, and then they ultimately brought them here to the port.
So we know marketing is the key of every organization. How would you define your target audience, and how are you currently attracting people to come to the museum?
That's a very good question. What we've been trying to do, our target is everyone in St. Lucie County, and that includes visitors. Anyone who enjoys history or wants to know where it all started. So we're targeting everybody. We have been I go out into the HOAs and talk to them about our history. I go to clubs, I go to different organizations. I've been trying, this podcast is one of the ways to try and get the information out there. It's a lot harder in such a big city to let people know we're here.
Well, like you said, Port St. Lucie is a fairly new city. It's one of the fastest growing cities in Florida. Have you ever thought about doing your very own podcast?
I haven't, and I really don't know enough about social media, but I love what we're doing right now, and this looks a lot more complicated.
Donnita, when you're not so busy with the museum, what do you like to do for fun?
Well, I love going around Port St. Lucie to all of the different parks and preserves and kayaking in the river. But I also like going to different events that talk about the history of St. Lucie County. And I visit other counties also to hear about their history.
Now, I know you said the museum and it has a lot of interesting facts. I want you to leave our listeners with one fact about Port St. Lucie that they didn't know, that they got to get to the museum to find out more information. What would that one thing be?
Well, it was incorporated in 1961, but in 1961, 0 people lived in Port St. Lucie. And what I'd like them to know is why. There were people here, but they weren't in Port St. Lucie. And we didn't even get a police department until 1980, which is kind of unusual. Yes.
Wow. So
And
our
now-
listeners, no, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and now, 65 years later, short years later, we're over 250,000 people in the incorporated Port St. Lucie.
Wow. For our listeners here that want to get more information, whether it's online, calling you, or just really stopping by the museum, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Okay, so we're located in the port, which is at 2456 Southeast Westmoreland Boulevard. And we're open Wednesday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and then on Saturday from 11 to 3. But we also have a website, which is pslhistory.org, and there on that website, the museum is a nonprofit organization, and it's entirely run by volunteers. And we're always looking for people who would like to help, guests to help support the mission. Our website will define all the different ways that you can help out. You can volunteer. You can join the Port St. Lucie Historical Society as an individual, a family, a business, or you can just simply come into the museum and share in the experience.
Listen, Donnita, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I wish you and your organization the very best moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnplive.com. That's gnplive.com.